The shuttle landed on Kepler 442b. With a soft thud that made everyone inside nervous, Commander Kang looked out the window at the barren landscape. The planet's surface was covered in strange purple rocks and twisted metal trees that gleamed in the dim light of the distant sun. Lieutenant Han checked his breathing gear for the third time. The planet's atmosphere was deadly to Nexari even. A small leak in their suits would mean death within minutes. The air was full of toxic gases that would burn their lungs and poison their blood. Ready to move out, Commander Han said to his team of 6 soldiers. They all carried weapons and scanning equipment. Their suits were bulky and made walking difficult, but they had no choice. Dr. Park was with them, carrying her scientific instruments. She wanted to study whatever they found at the research station. Her suit had extra equipment attached to it, making her look like a walking laboratory. The team walked across the rocky ground toward the research station. In the distance, the building was a dome shape made of white metal that should have been shining in the sunlight. Instead, it looked dark and dirty with black marks covering its surface. Strange readings on my scanner, Han said as they got closer. The air around the station has much higher toxin levels than the rest of the planet. Something is very wrong here. Captain Yoon stayed on the shuttle to monitor their progress and keep communication with the main ship. She watched on her screen as the team approached the station. The building looked empty and dead. The main door to the station was hanging open, which should have been impossible. The research station was supposed to be sealed tight to keep the poisonous atmosphere out. Dr. Park scanned the doorway and found traces of an explosion. Something blew the door open from the inside. She reported, "The metal is twisted outward." This was not an attack from outside. The team entered the station with their weapons ready. The lights were still working, but many of them were flickering. The air inside was just as toxic as outside, which meant the station's life support system had failed. Bodies, Han said quietly as they found their first victim. It was a Nexari scientist still wearing his protective gear but clearly dead. The body was in a strange position, like he had been running toward the exit when he died. Dr. Park scanned the body with her instruments. Her readings made her step back in shock. "Commander, this Nexari died from mortis spore poisoning. The toxin levels in his body are incredibly high. Mortis spore was one of the deadliest substances known to exist. It was a fungus that grew on only a few planets in the galaxy. Even tiny amounts could kill a Nexari in minutes. The spores would attack the nervous system and cause horrible pain before death. How did mortis spore get into the station?" Han asked while his team spread out to search the other rooms. Dr. Park was already working on her computer, pulling up information about the research station. The files showed that the scientists had been studying dangerous biological agents, including mortis spore. They had samples of the fungus in their laboratory. They found more bodies throughout the station. All of them had died from the same poison. The research team had been working on ways to use biological weapons against humans, but something had gone wrong. The containment system had failed and the deadly spores had escaped. In the main laboratory, Dr. Park found the source of the disaster. A large containment unit was broken open with glass and metal scattered across the floor. The unit had held samples of mortis spore for testing. Now it was empty, and the spores were everywhere. The final computer log showed what had happened. Dr. Nam, the head scientist, appeared on the screen looking panicked. "We are under attack," he said. "The humans have found our station. They are trying to break in. I am activating emergency protocols." The video showed explosions in the background and alarms going off. Dr. Nam was trying to reach the emergency controls when the containment unit exploded. The screen went dark as the deadly spores filled the room, but this made no sense to the rescue team. If humans had attacked the station, they would have died from the spores too. Mortis spore was deadly to all organic life forms. Nothing could survive exposure to it. Han found something strange near the station's main entrance. Human footprints in the dust leading away from the building. The prints were clear and showed that at least 5 humans had been here recently. "This is impossible," he said to Dr. Park. "The footprints lead directly through the most contaminated area. My scanner shows spore levels that would kill anything in seconds." Dr. Park checked her own instruments and confirmed what Han had found. The human footprints went right through areas where the mortis spore concentration was highest. No living thing should be able to survive there. They followed the footprints outside and found more evidence of human presence. Empty food containers and water bottles were scattered around the area. The containers were covered in spores but showed no signs of damage. The humans were here after the spore release. Dr. Park said while examining the containers they walked through the contaminated area and then stopped to eat and drink. This should not be possible. The team found tire tracks leading away from the station. The tracks showed that humans had used some kind of vehicle to leave the area, but the tracks also went through areas of heavy contamination. Captain Yoon contacted them from the shuttle. Team leader, we are detecting unusual readings about 2 kilometers from your position. There appears to be some kind of structure there. The team followed the tire tracks across the barren landscape. The spore contamination got worse as they traveled, making their instruments beep with warnings. Every step took them into more dangerous territory. They reached a hill overlooking a small valley. Dr. Park looked through her telescope and saw something that made her heart stop. A small human camp was set up in the valley below. Several humans were moving around without any protective gear. Commander Kong, this is impossible, she said into her radio. The humans are in the most contaminated area on the planet. They should all be dead. Through the telescope, they could see 5 humans working around their camp. One was a woman gathering something from the ground. Another was a man working on some kind of equipment. The others were setting up what looked like cooking equipment. The scanner readings showed that the valley had the highest concentration of mortis spores on the entire planet. The air was so poisonous that it would kill a Nexari instantly, even through their protective suits, yet the humans were breathing it like normal air. Dr. Park recorded everything she saw. The humans appeared healthy and normal. They were talking to each other and moving around easily. One of them was even laughing about something. This changes everything, she whispered to herself. These humans are not just surviving the deadliest poison in the galaxy, they are living in it like it means nothing. The team watched the human camp for an hour, trying to understand what they were seeing. The humans showed no signs of distress or sickness. They worked and talked like people on a normal camping trip. Han tried to move closer for better readings, but his scanner warned him that the spore levels would kill him even in his protective suit. The humans were living in an environment that was instant death for any other known species. As the alien sun began to set, the team prepared to return to their shuttle. They had found the answer to what happened at the research station, but the answer was more terrifying than any question they had started with. The humans had not just survived the biological weapon that killed the Nexari research team, they were living in it like it was their natural home. The next morning, Lieutenant Han stood at the edge of the valley, watching the human camp through his telescope. His hands were shaking inside his protective gloves. The readings from his scanner made no sense. The spore levels around the humans were 10 times higher than anywhere else on the planet. Dr. Park worked frantically on her computer, trying to find some explanation for what they were seeing. Her instruments showed that the humans were breathing air that contained enough poison to kill every Nexari on their ship, yet they looked perfectly healthy. Commander Kong, we need to get closer, she said through the radio. I need better readings to understand what is happening. The humans might have some kind of protection we cannot see from. The shuttle. Captain Yoon was monitoring everything through satellite feeds. She could see the human camp clearly, and it looked like a normal camping trip. People were moving around doing daily activities without any care for the deadly environment. Sergeant Kim operated the tracking drone that followed the human footprints. The drone could get closer than the Nexari team without risking their lives. Its cameras showed the trail leading directly through the most contaminated areas on the planet. The footprints tell a story, Kim said while studying the data. The humans walked here from the research station. They did not run or try to avoid the contaminated areas. They just walked normally, like they were taking a stroll through a park. Dr. Park found this especially disturbing. The mortis spore had been released 3 days ago, which meant the humans had been living in the poison for at least that long. Most creatures would die within minutes of exposure. Through the telescope, Han watched a human woman collecting something from the ground. She was picking up pieces of the purple fungus that grew everywhere on the planet. The fungus was pure mortis spore, one of the deadliest substances in the galaxy. She is collecting the spores with her bare hands. Han reported the woman is touching the fungus directly without any protection. She is putting it into a container like she's gathering berries. The woman looked young and healthy. Her name was Hannah, according to the radio chatter they had intercepted. She moved easily and seemed to be enjoying her work. She even hummed a tune while gathering the deadly fungus another human named. Bong was working on what looked like a cooking setup. He had built a fire and was preparing some kind of meal. The smoke from his fire carried concentrated spores that would kill a Nexari from a kilometer away. To our park adjusted her instruments to get better readings. The spore concentration around the cooking fire was beyond anything she had ever measured. It was like the humans were living inside a weapon designed to kill organic life. A third human called Dong was working on their vehicle. It was a simple machine made of metal and plastic with no special protection against the toxic environment. He had parts spread out on the ground and was fixing something with basic tools. The fourth human was a woman named Hai who was setting up what looked like sleeping areas. She was arranging blankets and pillows in the open air where the spores were thickest. She worked calmly like she was preparing for a comfortable night. The fifth human was a man named Wu, who was checking some kind of equipment. He had instruments that looked much simpler than Nexari technology, but he seemed confident in what he was doing. Commander Kang received all the reports from his team and found them impossible to believe. These humans were not just surviving in the most toxic environment known to exist, they were living comfortably like they were at home. To our park, this cannot be real, he said through the radio. Check your instruments again. There must be some mistake. DR Park had already checked everything 3 times. The readings were correct. The humans were breathing air that would kill any other species instantly. They were touching substances that would poison anything else, and they showed no signs of distress. The team continued watching as the humans went about their daily activities. They saw Hana washing the fungus she had collected in a stream. The water downstream would be poisonous enough to kill thousands of Nexari. Bong started preparing the fungus for cooking. He cleaned it carefully and cut it into pieces. The concentrated spores from his work filled the air around the camp, but the other humans breathed it normally. Dong finished fixing their vehicle and started it up. The engine made noise and smoke, but it ran smoothly. The humans had built their machine to work in this toxic environment without any special protection. Hai completed the sleeping area and called the others over. They gathered around the fire that Bong had built. The flames were burning pieces of the purple fungus and filling the air with deadly smoke. Wu checked his instruments one more time and nodded to the others. Everything was ready for whatever they were planning to do next. The Nexari team watched in horror as the humans prepared for their evening meal. They were getting ready to eat the same fungus that had killed every Nexari at the research station. This is madness, Han whispered into his radio. They are about to consume pure mortis spore. The amount they have prepared would kill our entire fleet. DR Park was recording everything, but she could hardly believe what she was seeing. The humans had collected enough poisonous fungus to create a biological weapon capable of destroying planets, yet they were treating it like food. Captain Yoon from the shuttle was following the satellite feeds. The images showed the human camp clearly and everything looked normal except for the impossible fact that they were living in pure poison. Humans sat around their fire talking and laughing like friends on a camping trip. They passed around water bottles and shared stories while breathing air that would kill anything else. In minutes, Sergeant Kim focused the drone camera on the cooking fire. The flames were burning the purple fungus and creating smoke that contained concentrated death. The humans sat in the smoke like it was a pleasant evening breeze. DR Park made a decision that would change everything. Commander, I need to get closer. I need readings from right next to the human camp to understand what is happening. Han protested. Dr. Park, that would be suicide. The spore levels would kill you even in your protective suit. But Dr. Park was determined. She was the chief scientist, and this was the greatest mystery she had ever encountered. She had to understand how the humans could survive in conditions that were impossible for any other life. Form the team prepared for a closer approach. They would move as close as their equipment would allow and try to get better readings. The humans seemed peaceful, but they were still the enemy. As they prepared to move, Han noticed something else about the human camp. The ground around it was covered in the purple fungus, but it was different from the rest of the planet. The fungus around the humans was larger and more vibrant. It is like the fungus grows better near the humans, he reported. This makes no sense. The spores should be killing everything, but they seem to be helping the fungus grow. DR Park realized they were dealing with something beyond their understanding. These humans were not just immune to the deadliest poison in the galaxy. They seemed to have some kind of relationship with it. The team moved closer to the human camp, stepping carefully through the contaminated landscape. Every step took them deeper into what should have been instant death, but the humans ahead of them lived there like it was paradise. Commander Kang stood in the center of his ship, watching the large screen that showed empty space where his battle fleet used to be 3 hours ago. He had 27 ships full of brave Nexari warriors. Now he had only his command ship and the screams of dying soldiers still echoing in his mind. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines. Captain Yoon walked up to him with her head down. She was his second in command and had been his friend for many years. Her silver skin looked pale and her large black eyes were filled with sadness. "Commander, they are all gone," she said in a voice so quiet he could barely hear her. "The human fleet destroyed everything. We lost the battle cruiser Starlight and the destroyers Moonbeam and Void Strike. The humans used some kind of explosive weapons that tore through our shields like they were made of paper." Kong felt his heart sink. The Nexari had been at war with the humans for 3 years, and every single battle had been a disaster. His people were supposed to be the smartest beings in the galaxy. They had technology that could travel between stars and weapons that could destroy planets, but somehow these primitive humans kept winning. "How many survivors?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer would break his heart. Yun looked at the floor. "Only 43 escape pods made it out. Most of the crew died when the ships exploded. The humans targeted our life support systems first. They knew exactly where to hit us to cause the most damage." This was what scared Kong the most about humans. They did not fight like civilized beings. The Nexari had rules for war. They aimed for weapons and engines to disable enemy ships without killing everyone, but humans seemed to enjoy destruction. They attacked with a fury that made no sense. To our park, the ship's chief scientist walked over to join them. She was younger than Kong and Yoon, but she was the smartest person on the ship. Her job was to study human technology and find ways to defeat them, but so far she had failed. "Commander, I have been studying the wreckage from our last battle," she said while holding a small device. "The human weapons are very simple compared to ours. They use chemical explosives and metal projectiles, but they work better than our energy weapons." Somehow Kang looked at the device. It was a piece of a human missile that had punched through the armor of one of his ships. The metal was rough and ugly compared to the smooth surfaces of Nexari technology, but it had done its job. "Their ships are like boxes made of metal and ceramics," Dr. Park continued. "They should not be able to survive in space for very long, but somehow they keep fighting even when half their ship is destroyed." I watched a human vessel continue attacking us even though it was leaking air and on fire. This was another thing that puzzled the Nexari about humans. They seemed to care nothing for their own lives. When Nexari ships were damaged, the crews would try to escape and save themselves, but humans would keep fighting until their ship was completely destroyed. They never surrendered. Captain Yoon brought up a holographic display showing the war so far. Red dots marked every battle they had lost. Blue dots showed the few times they had managed to retreat without total defeat. There were no green dots for victories. "We started this war because we needed water," she said, pointing to the display. "Earth has more water than any planet we have ever found. We thought the humans would be easy to defeat. They had only been in space for a few hundred years, while we have been traveling the stars for thousands. The plan had seemed so simple. Find a primitive species that had something the Nexari needed, take what they wanted, and move on to the next planet." They had done this many times before with other species. Most aliens would surrender as soon as they saw Nexari technology, but humans were different. From the very first battle they had fought with a madness that terrified the Nexari. They used tactics that made no sense. They would ram their ships into Nexari vessels. They would detonate explosives on their own ships to damage the enemy. They treated war like some kind of game. Dr. Park activated another display showing human colony worlds. There were hundreds of them spread across dozens of star systems. Some were on planets that should have been impossible to live on: hot worlds with poisonous air, cold worlds with no atmosphere, ocean worlds with crushing pressure. How do they survive on so many different types of planets? Dr. Park asked. "This should not be possible. Most species need very specific conditions to live, but humans seem to be able to adapt to anything." Kang had wondered about this too. His people, the Nexari, could only live on planets with methane atmosphere. and low gravity. They needed special suits to visit most worlds, but humans seemed to live everywhere. They had colonies on desert planets, jungle planets, ice planets, and even floating cities in the clouds of gas giants. The communications officer, a young Nexari named Shin, suddenly spoke up. "Commander, we are receiving a distress signal from Research Station 7 on Kepler 442b. Kong felt his blood run cold. Research Station 7 was one of their most secret facilities. They had been working on biological weapons there, weapons designed to kill humans without damaging the planets they lived on. "What is the message?" he asked. The station went silent. 3 days ago, Shin replied, but now we are getting an automated emergency signal. The message says the station has been compromised, and all personnel are missing. Captain Yoon looked worried. Kepler 442b is deep in human territory. If they found our research station, they might have learned about our biological weapons program. Dr. Park was already working on her computer, pulling up information about the station. Commander, the research team was led by Dr. Nam. They were studying toxins and diseases that might be effective against human biology. The station had a full laboratory and samples of some of the deadliest substances in the galaxy. This was exactly what Kong had feared. The Nexari had been trying to develop biological weapons because their conventional weapons were not working, but if humans had captured the station, they might learn about the plan. They might even use the weapons against Nexari worlds. We have to go there. He decided we need to find out what happened to our people and destroy any evidence of what we were doing. But Commander Yoon said, "What if it is a trap? The humans might be waiting for us." Kang looked at his remaining crew. They were all that was left of his once mighty fleet. If he lost them, there would be no one left to report back to the Nexari High Command. But he could not leave their people behind. "We go carefully," he said. "Set course for Kepler 442b. But keep our weapons ready and our shields up at maximum power." As the ship turned toward the distant planet, Kang wondered what they would find there. The humans had already proven they could destroy Nexari fleets. Now they might have captured one of their most secret weapons. The war was going badly, and it seemed like it could only get worse. Dr. Park continued studying her data about human technology and biology. She was looking for some weakness, something that might give the Nexari an advantage. But the more she learned, the more worried she became. These humans were not like any species she had studied before. They seemed to be built for war and destruction. They could survive in environments that would kill most other beings. They fought with weapons that were crude but effective, and they never gave up no matter how hopeless their situation became. The ship moved through space toward Kepler 442b and the mystery waiting there. None of them knew that what they would find would change everything about the war. The Nexari team crept closer to the human camp until they reached the maximum safe distance. Their instruments were screaming warnings about the toxic levels, but they had to see what happened next. Dr. Park held her breath as she watched through her telescope. Hannah, the human woman, began washing the purple fungus in the stream near their camp. The water turned dark as the spores mixed with it. Dr. Park calculated that just one drop of that water would kill a Nexari within seconds, yet Hannah worked with her hands directly in the poisoned stream. The woman seemed to be enjoying her work. She hummed softly while cleaning each piece of fungus carefully. The deadly spores covered her hands and arms, but she showed no signs of distress. Her skin looked healthy and normal. Bong, the human man, had built up his cooking fire and was preparing to cook the fungus. The flames danced higher as he added more fuel. The smoke that rose from the fire carried concentrated mortis spores that would kill any Nexari from kilometers away. Lieutenant Han watched through his binoculars as Bong placed the cleaned fungus into a cooking pot. The amount of poison in that pot could destroy entire cities, yet the human treated it like any ordinary meal. "This is impossible," Han whispered to Dr. Park. "The concentration of spores in that cooking pot is beyond anything we have ever measured. How can he touch it without dying instantly?" Dr. Park was recording everything, but her hands were shaking. The readings from her instruments showed spore levels that her equipment could barely measure. The humans were not just surviving, they were concentrating the poison and making it stronger. The other humans gathered around the cooking fire. Dong finished working on their vehicle and joined the group. Hai completed her camp setup and sat down near the flames. Wu put away his instruments and smiled at his companions. The 5 humans sat in a circle around the fire, breathing air that would kill the entire Nexari fleet. They talked and laughed like friends enjoying a peaceful evening. The deadly smoke from the burning fungus swirled around them like a gentle breeze. Captain Yoon watched from the shuttle through satellite feeds. What she saw made her question everything she thought she knew about life in the universe. The humans were living in conditions that should be impossible for any organic being. Sergeant Kim focused the drone camera on the cooking pot. The fungus was bubbling and steaming. As it cooked, the steam carried even more concentrated spores into the air around the camp. The humans breathed it deeply like it was fresh mountain. Airbong stirred the cooking fungus with a wooden spoon. The spores stuck to the spoon in his hands. But he showed no concern. He tasted the mixture and nodded approvingly. Then he added some kind of seasoning from a small container. Dr. Park nearly dropped her telescope when she saw what the human added to the cooking pot. It was salt, but not ordinary salt. Her instruments detected traces of other toxins mixed with it. The humans were adding more poison to their already deadly meal. The fungus finished cooking and Bong began serving it to his companions. He used simple wooden bowls and metal spoons. The steam rising from the bowls carried enough concentrated death to poison an entire planet. Hannah received the first bowl, and the Nexari team watched in horror as she took the first bite. They expected her to collapse immediately. The amount of mortis spore in that single bite should have killed her in seconds. Instead, Hannah smiled and complimented the flavor. She said something about the fungus being perfectly cooked and having a nice earthy taste. The other humans laughed and agreed with her assessment. This is not possible, Dr. Park said into her radio. The human just consumed enough poison to kill thousands of our people. She should be dead, but she is asking for more. The other humans began eating their portions of the deadly fungus. They ate slowly and seemed to enjoy every bite. They passed around water bottles filled with the contaminated stream water and drank deeply. Dong commented that the fungus was better than the last batch they had cooked. This meant the humans had been eating the deadly spores for a long time. It was not an accident or a desperate survival situation. They actually preferred this poison as food. High mentioned that they should gather more of the fungus tomorrow because it was so delicious. The humans were planning to continue living in the toxic environment and eating the deadliest substance in the galaxy. Wu suggested they try cooking the fungus with different seasonings. Next time he wanted to experiment with various ways to prepare their poisonous meal. The humans treated the deadly spores like ingredients in a recipe. The Nexari team watched in stunned silence as the humans finished their meal and began cleaning up. They washed their bowls in the contaminated stream and put away their cooking equipment. The deadly spores covered everything they touched. After dinner, the humans sat around their fire talking about their day. They discussed their work and made plans for tomorrow. They seemed completely relaxed and happy, living in what should have been a death trap. Han noticed that the humans were not wearing any special clothing or equipment. They had simple clothes made of normal fabric and basic tools made of metal and plastic. There was no advanced technology protecting them from the poison. Dr. Park realized that the humans were not using any external protection. They were naturally immune to the mortis spores. Their bodies could handle toxins that would kill any other known species. This was not technology. It was biology. The implications were terrifying. The Nexari had spent years developing biological weapons to use against humans. They had created toxins and diseases designed to wipe out human colonies. But if humans could eat the deadliest poison in the galaxy, what hope did any biological weapon have? Captain Yoon contacted Commander Kong on the main ship. Sir, we have a problem. The humans are not just surviving the mortis spores, they are eating them like food and enjoying the taste. Commander Kong could not believe what he was hearing. That is impossible, Captain. The mortis spores are deadly to all organic life. There must be some mistake. Dr. Park transmitted her data to the main ship. The readings were clear and undeniable. The humans had consumed enough poison to kill every living thing on multiple planets, yet they were perfectly healthy and asking for seconds. The human camp settled down for the night. The deadly fire burned low but continued to fill the air with toxic smoke. The humans arranged their sleeping areas in the open air where the spore concentration was highest. As the alien sun set, the humans prepared for sleep. They brushed their teeth with water from the contaminated stream and changed into sleeping clothes. Covered in deadly spores, they lay down on blankets in the most toxic environment known to exist. The Nexari team watched through the night as the humans slept. Peacefully surrounded by enough poison to destroy civilizations, they breathed the deadly air naturally and showed no signs of distress. Dr. Park worked through the night analyzing her data. The readings all pointed to the same impossible conclusion. The humans were not just immune to the deadliest poison in the galaxy, they seemed to thrive on it. By morning, the Nexari team knew they had witnessed something that would change the war forever. The humans were not just tough fighters, they were creatures who could eat death itself and ask for more. The Nexari team returned to their shuttle in complete silence. Everyone was trying to process what they had witnessed. Dr. Park carried her recording equipment with shaking hands. The data inside contained proof of something that should have been impossible. Lieutenant Han helped load the equipment while his mind raced with questions. Everything he thought he knew about biology and survival had been proven wrong. The humans were living proof that life could adapt in ways the Nexari had never imagined. Back on the main ship, Commander Kang paced the bridge, waiting for his team to return. Captain Yoon had transmitted brief reports, but the full data would tell the complete story. He needed to understand what had happened on the planet's surface. Dr. Park connected her instruments to the ship's main computer and began uploading the data. The readings filled the screen with numbers that made no sense. The toxin levels were beyond anything in their databases. Look at this, Commander, she said, pointing to the display. The humans consumed mortis spore concentrations that are off our measurement scale. A single bite contained enough poison to kill our entire crew. The bridge crew gathered around the display to see the impossible data. The numbers showed spore levels that their equipment could barely detect. The humans had eaten concentrated death and treated it like a normal meal. Captain Yoon studied the video recordings of the human camp. The footage showed 5 humans living comfortably in the most toxic environment known to exist. They had eaten the deadly fungus, laughed about the taste, and asked for more. This changes everything about the war, she said. Quietly, we have been developing biological weapons for 3 years, thinking we could use them against humans, but if they can eat mortis spores like food, what hope do we have? Commander Kang contacted Nexari High Command to report their discovery. The military leaders on the homeworld needed to know what they were really fighting against. The humans were not just tough, they were immune to poison. General Choi appeared on the communication screen from the Nexari capital. His silver face was stern and he looked tired from managing the losing war. Commander Kang report. Your findings from the research station, sir. We found something that will change how we understand this conflict, Kang replied. The humans are not just surviving our biological weapons, they are immune to toxins that kill everything else. General Choi looked skeptical. That is impossible, Commander. All organic life forms are vulnerable to mortis spores. Your team must have made an error in their measurements. Dr. Park stepped forward and transmitted her data to High Command. General, with respect, the readings are accurate. The humans consumed enough poison to destroy entire planets. They showed no signs of distress. The data appeared on General Choi's screen and his expression changed from skepticism to shock. The numbers were beyond anything the Nexari had ever recorded. The spore concentrations were lethal to all known life. How is this possible? The general asked. The humans should have died instantly from exposure to those toxin levels. No creature can survive that much poison. Dr. Park had been working on that question all night. Sir, I believe the humans evolved on a planet that was naturally toxic to most life forms. Their bodies adapted to handle substances that would kill other species. This revelation sent shockwaves through the Nexari command structure. The war had been based on the assumption that humans were fragile creatures who could be defeated with superior technology and biological weapons. Captain Yoon accessed the research station files and found more disturbing information. The Nexari scientists had been testing various toxins on human prisoners for months. Every single test had failed to kill the humans. The test subjects either showed no reaction to the poison or became only mildly sick. Some of the humans had even asked for more of the toxins, claiming they tasted interesting. The Nexari scientists thought the humans were lying or being defiant, but now they understood the truth. The humans were not being defiant. They genuinely enjoyed consuming substances that were deadly to other species. The failed experiments were not failures, they were proof of human immunity. Dr. Park found the final research log from Dr. Nam, the head scientist at the station. His last entry explained that humans had evolved on a planet so dangerous that they developed immunity to almost everything, produces plants and animals that create toxins as defense mechanisms, he had written, but to humans these toxins are just flavors and nutrients. They seek out spicy foods, alcoholic drinks, and bitter plants that would kill most species. The implications were staggering. The Nexari had been trying to poison creatures who treated poison as seasoning. The humans did not just survive toxins, they actively sought them out. For pleasure, Commander Kang realized that every biological weapon the Nexari had developed was useless against humans. The toxins that were meant to kill human colonies would probably be harvested and used as food ingredients. General Choi was studying the data with growing alarm. The military had spent enormous resources developing biological weapons that would have no effect on their enemies. The entire strategy was based on false assumptions. Dr. Park continued her analysis and found even more disturbing facts. Human foods contained compounds that would kill Nexari instantly. Coffee, alcohol, spices, and many common human foods were deadly poisons to most galactic species. The humans drink a substance called coffee that contains caffeine. She reported caffeine is a neurotoxin that would kill a Nexari in minutes, but humans consume it daily for pleasure and energy. Even worse, the humans consumed something called alcohol, which was a cellular poison. The humans fermented organic matter to create this toxin and then drank it socially. The stronger the alcohol, the more they seemed to enjoy it. Captain Yoon found information about human spices. Many human foods contained capsaicin, a chemical that caused pain in most creatures. The humans had bred plants to produce higher concentrations of this toxin and used it to make their food more enjoyable. The Nexari command began to understand the true scope of the problem. They were not fighting a primitive species that could be defeated with superior weapons. They were fighting creatures that had evolved to thrive on death itself. The psychological impact on the Nexari military was immediate. Ship captains reported that their crews were losing morale. The idea of fighting enemies who ate poison for breakfast was destroying their confidence. Dr. Park made the final and most terrifying discovery. The humans were not just immune to known toxins, they seemed to be able to adapt to new poisons as well. Their bodies could learn to handle substances they had never encountered before. This meant that even if the Nexari developed new biological weapons, the humans would probably survive them. The human immune system was like nothing else in the galaxy. It could handle any challenge and turn it into nutrition. Commander Kang looked at his crew and saw the same realization in their eyes. The war was not just unwinnable, it was pointless. The humans were so far beyond what the Nexari could handle that fighting them was like trying to poison a creature made of poison itself. General Choi closed the communication channel to discuss the situation with other military leaders. The Nexari High Command had to decide whether to continue a war they could never win or find some other solution. The bridge of the ship was quiet as everyone processed the implications of what they had learned. The humans were not just surviving the deadliest toxins in the galaxy, they were turning those toxins into lunch. Dr. Park began preparing a complete report on human biology and immunity. The report would change everything the Nexari thought they knew about life in the universe. Some creatures were not meant to be fought, they were meant to be respected. The war had started because the Nexari thought humans were weak and primitive. Now they knew the truth. The humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of their weapons, but because of their biology. The news spread through the Nexari fleet like wildfire. Ship after ship received the recordings from Kepler 442b. The footage of humans eating deadly fungus was transmitted from vessel to vessel, and the psychological impact was devastating. Captain Yoon watched as her crew gathered around the communication screens to see the impossible footage. The video showed 5 humans sitting around a fire eating enough poison to kill thousands of Nexari. They were laughing and asking for seconds. How do you fight an enemy that treats your deadliest weapons as dinner? Lieutenant Han asked while staring at the screen. His hands were still shaking from what he had witnessed on the planet's surface. The crew of the command ship was not alone in their shock. Throughout the fleet, Nexari soldiers were watching the same videos and asking the same questions. The recordings showed humans living comfortably in an environment that was instant death for any other species. Dr. Park worked frantically to complete her analysis of human biology. Her report would be distributed to every ship in the fleet. The findings would change everything about how the Nexari understood their enemy's Commander Kang. Received reports from other ship captains. The morale of the entire fleet was collapsing. Soldiers who had been brave warriors were now terrified of fighting creatures who ate poison for breakfast. On the battleship Moonlight, Captain Lee reported that his crew was refusing to load biological weapons. They said there was no point in using weapons that would probably just season the humans' food. The destroyer Starfire sent a message that their science team had analyzed their own biological weapon stores. Every toxin they carried was similar to substances that humans consumed for pleasure. The weapons were useless. General Choi called an emergency meeting of the Nexari High Command. The military leaders gathered in the Great Hall on the home world to discuss the crisis. The war was not just going badly, it was revealed to be impossible. Dr. Park transmitted her complete report to the High Command. The analysis showed that humans had evolved on a planet so dangerous that they developed immunity to almost everything. Earth was a death world that had created the ultimate survivors. The report explained that human foods contained compounds that would kill most galactic species instantly. Coffee, chocolate, spices, alcohol, and even water from Earth contained toxins that were deadly to other life forms, but to humans these toxins were nutrients and flavors. They had spent thousands of years cultivating plants that produced higher concentrations of deadly compounds. The spicier and more bitter the food, the more they seemed to enjoy it. General Choi stood before the assembled military leaders and read from Dr. Park's report. The humans drink a substance called coffee that contains enough caffeine to kill a Nexari in minutes. They consume it multiple times per day for energy. The generals looked at each other in shock. One of them asked, "How can we fight creatures who use our biological weapons as breakfast seasoning?" Dr. Park had included video analysis of human eating habits. The footage showed humans consuming foods that glowed with toxicity warnings on Nexari scanners. They ate plants that produced natural pesticides and animals that concentrated heavy metals. The psychological warfare was complete. The Nexari military had lost the will to fight. The idea of battling creatures who were immune to poison and thrived on death was destroying their confidence. Admiral Jin, who commanded the home fleet, stood up and spoke the words that everyone was thinking: "We cannot win this war. The humans are not just tough fighters, they are living weapons that eat death itself." The biological weapons program was immediately shut down. The Nexari had spent years and enormous resources developing toxins that would be useless against humans. The entire strategy was based on false assumptions about human biology. Captain Yoon suggested a new approach. Instead of trying to destroy the humans, maybe they could negotiate. The humans had shown they were willing to share space with other species. They had alien friends on some of their worlds. Commander Kong agreed that negotiation was the only option. The Nexari could offer their advanced technology in exchange for access to water resources. The humans might be willing to trade instead of fight. General Choi authorized the first peace contact. In 3 years of war, the message would be broadcast on all frequencies, hoping that human commanders would listen. The Nexari wanted to end the fighting and find a peaceful solution. The message was simple. The Nexari offered to stop all attacks and begin negotiations. They would share their technology in exchange for trade agreements. The war had been a mistake based on misunderstanding. The response came from Admiral Davis of the Human Defense Force. She agreed to meet for peace talks, but she chose an unusual location for the negotiations: Luna Station, which had restaurants that served human food. The final meeting took place in a Korean restaurant on Luna Station. The Nexari diplomats arrived in full protective gear because the air contained traces of human food toxins. The humans sat casually at the table eating spicy dishes. Admiral Davis welcomed the Nexari delegation with a smile. She was eating kimchi, which glowed bright red on the aliens' toxicity scanners. The fermented vegetables contained enough bacteria and spices to kill a Nexari instantly. Commander Kong represented the Nexari at the negotiations. He tried not to look at the human food, which registered as deadly poison on all his instruments. The humans were eating biological weapons and calling it lunch. The negotiations were surprisingly simple. The humans agreed to share water resources in exchange for Nexari technology they also offered to establish trade routes that would benefit both species. Dr. Park attended the meeting as a scientific advisor. She watched in fascination as the humans ate their toxic food during the negotiations. They consumed deadly spices and fermented drinks while discussing peace treaties. Admiral Davis offered to share some of the Korean food with the Nexari delegation. The aliens politely declined, explaining that human food was too dangerous for their biology. The humans laughed and said they understood. The peace treaty was signed over a meal that could have killed the entire Nexari fleet. The humans ate their spicy, toxic food while the aliens watched in protective suits. The contrast was both terrifying and amusing. Captain Yoon realized that the war had ended not with a great battle, but with understanding the humans were not evil or aggressive. They were simply too dangerous to fight. Their biology made them immune to conventional weapons. The Nexari fleet began withdrawing from human territory. The ships that had fought desperately for 3 years were now heading home. With news of peace, the war was over because the aliens finally understood what they were really fighting. Lieutenant Han looked back at the human colonies as their ship departed. The worlds were full of creatures who ate poison for breakfast and drank toxins for pleasure. The humans were the ultimate survivors in a galaxy full of death. Dr. Park continued her research on human biology. Her work would help other species understand the incredible adaptations that evolution had created on Earth. The humans were living proof that life could overcome any challenge. The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with respect. The Nexari had learned that some species were too dangerous to fight and too valuable to destroy. The humans were partners, not enemies. As the Nexari ships jumped to hyperspace, Commander Kong thought about the 5 humans on Kepler 442b. They were probably still there, eating their poisonous fungus and enjoying their toxic paradise. They had ended a